Nicole, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. So give a little introduction to the people who are going to be listening and watching, who you are, what your subject is. Just introduce yourself, basically.
Cool. So, hey, my name's Nicole. I live in Bristol. That's how Wesley and I got to know each other. So I'm studying neuroscience at the moment. I went back to university at the age of 27. So that was a little bit hard because you have a certain way of living, and then you have to kind of get rid of all of those things that you believe in and just focus on a university. And then sometimes, your friends ask you out, and you have to it's just, and also like money, you want to work, so you want to earn a certain type of living, but then you also have to study. So it's been a little bit challenging in that sense, but nonetheless really, really fun, really amazing, really interesting. And then I'm I guess mature student.
What sparked you to want to go into higher education, but also what made you choose neuroscience? Is it something that you'd always been drawn to, or was there like a life event that happened?
Ish. So what was the first question?
What made you want to do any sort of, was it just because, so did you want to do neuroscience, so you had to do higher education, or were you looking to educate yourself?
No, so I always knew I wanted to study, but so I went to school in South Africa. I was born in Italy, moved to South Africa, and then I finished high school there. But because you don't really get student funding in South Africa, I didn't ever think that I was going to study there. So I moved to England, not thinking I'm moving to study. But then I realized when I was here that I had to live in the country for 5 years before I could get a student loan because I'm Italian. So I did that, not thinking, oh, I've got to go and study, but I knew that I would at some point. I wasn't ready. I still wanted to, travel and do loads of things. And I knew that the time would come. And then one of my friends was chatting to me at the gym in London. I used to work in London, about a course that she was doing. It was like a bridge course to bridge, because she was a mature student as well, saying that she was going into physiotherapy with it. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I need. I didn't know you could have, do these things. So I decided to do the foundation year, which is like a pre-med course for people who wanted to go into medicine or science, which is what I did. And then, I've always thought of doing either medicine and going into psychiatry, or surgery. That'd be great. But neuroscience, I've always had a really keen interest for that. I started reading books, and I read this one book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. And that kind of just changed my mind and everything, because I really enjoyed the psychological side of the brain, but then also the neuroscience side of the brain. And I found that there's not that many people that kind of bring the two together. So I wanted to do neuroscience as my undergraduate, and then potentially do psychology as my master's, which would then allow me to do a neuropsychology PhD. Which is weird actually, because you have to do psychology. You have to do psychology to get into a neuropsychology PhD. You'd think it would be the other way around. Yeah. But no, so I have to do it that way around. But so that's why I'm doing neuroscience first, then a master's. Otherwise, I would have been able to do psychology straight into a PhD. So I'm taking an extra year there. So I always knew I wanted to. I kind of just let things happen, and when it came to me at the right time, and I was ready to do it. And so that's why. And the reason why, I guess, is, well, my father was schizophrenic, and my mother remarried to an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. But, people will always look at addicts and go, an addict or whatever. But, Casey, my stepfather, he was in the Rwanda genocide as a Navy SEAL. He was part of the Dutch Navy SEALs, and then he went undercover as a drug undercover cop.
Wow. So that, I need to speak to him.
Yeah.
He does some amazing stories.
But yeah. And I was really interested by, all this craziness, and I thought there's always a reason why people are the way they are. People don't just wake up and go, you know what, I'm gonna start drinking now, and I'm gonna ruin my life. Yeah. Things happen, and I feel like I don't know enough about it to actually make a valid point, but I do think that no one really wakes up and goes, I'm going to murder someone today. There's either a nurture problem or a nature problem, and there's either something wrong, you know, on a neurological level, and that's where the neuropsychology comes in. Is like there's something wrong, but is it neurological, or is it something that happened over the years from perpetual abuse or upbringing or whatever? So those are my really keen interests in neuroscience. So like the developmental psychology with children, especially because I never knew how important it was, you know, for a child's brain to develop until I started studying neuroscience and doing psychology. So developmental psychology was one of my modules last year, and I was like, whoa, kids are important, man. Like I always knew that, but kids are special. And that's been proven through science as well, which is what even amazed me even more. So you know, kids, you're born with the same amount of neurons as you would have in your adult life. Nothing changes except the synaptic connections between the neurons. So if you look at a child's brain and you look at an adult brain, it will have the same amount of neurons, but you'll see a lot more kind of jungle in the adult brain because the brain still has to develop. And children, basically, in your first 0 to 2, so when you're born to 2 years old, it's called your sensorimotor stage, developmental stage. It was a guy called Piaget came up with it. All these stages of developmental psychology in children, or in everyone actually, because we're all children before we.
So for me, I'm massively into more the psychology side of things. Obviously, from being an athlete, and so like especially because I base jump, I paraglide and stuff. So psychology and sports psychology is really important to me. But then on the neuroscience level, I've done. You know, I'm sure you're going to talk, and I'll be sat here dribbling like an ape. But there are subjects that, so like I know about Piaget and Vygotsky. So is it Vygotsky? Is that he? Yeah. So I know a lot about their two theories, and I've read a lot of their sort of work and the developmental stages of children and how important they are. So this is an area that really interests me. Luckily, it's one that interests me. Yeah, so I have a daughter. She's now 19, and I think, like, I had her when I was young. I was 17 when I had my daughter, and this is one of the things that intrigues me now as I think of how she's turned out and the mistakes that were made from myself, from my partner, being a split relationship, but of two. Like lots of people are raised in a split family, but we were split 18-year-olds. So you've got two kids raising a kid who aren't even together. So it's So I think of all the things that maybe contributed, and then when I've looked into further stuff with children, like toxic stress. Now the thing is, whenever you put the word toxic in front of something, now it gets dismissed by public or society. Like toxic masculinity and stuff gets so abused that when you put toxic in front of anything, people sort of shy away from it. But you can elaborate on this definitely. I think toxic stress and its links to even stuff like asthma and etc. I think it's so intriguing that toxic stress can have such an impact from a neuroscience level and then through physical as well.
Yeah, so there's actually, so that's another area of interest of mine is epigenetics.
Yeah.
And I just wrote a paper on epigenetics and the impact that stress has on people, children, and not just stress, but also smoking, drinking, even the environment you're in. There's a twin theory. I don't know if you've heard of it. So you could have two twins, and they're born, and one of them is really beautiful, and the other one really isn't. They're raised in the same home, the same, parents. There's no abuse, but the one who is more pretty will probably have more social interactions with other people and other children. She'll probably be able to get things better. And I know that sounds crazy, but it does happen. People are superficial, unfortunately. So what happens is the less ugly one, I'm going to put that in inverted commas because I don't believe anyone's ugly, but the one that's less attractive will go through life maybe being more shy, or they both potentially have the predisposition to be depressed. It's in the genes. So I don't know if you know how genes work. Maybe I should backtrack a little bit. So every bit of DNA in the body carries the same DNA throughout, But now you need to differentiate, because a muscle DNA or gene can't be the same as, I don't know, the heart. So what happens is you get methyl groups that switch this DNA sequence on and off where it needs to be on and off, so it can say, okay, this is a heart, this is a muscle, this is the brain, this is whatever. So you could have a predisposition for schizophrenia or Alzheimer's or depression. That's why there's a lot of schizophrenia cases that are correlated to high levels of stress, toxic stress. Because what happens is you can flick those things on and off where they shouldn't be on and off. So what happens is if both the girls have, carry the gene for depression, the one who endures more stress will more likely be able to switch that on and then become depressed. And whereas the other one won't, because she's never had to go through the stressful, encounters that the other one has. It's not been proven. There are other research papers that do prove epigenetics. That is a theory, but it's a really important one to take on board, considering, how everything affects us in life, I think. And how people can be either so uplifting to each other, or so, we can either put out the fire with the water, or we can drown someone with the water. And it's just how you behave. And I guess that's going into social psychology.
Well, I think so, because you touched on epigenetics. I mean, so my main interest through neuroscience sparked because my mum had MS. So my mum had MS, so I started to learn about neurological diseases and the fact that it was myelin. It was a big problem, and so I started to look towards neuroscience a bit. And again, still, I'm very much in first grade, know very little, but really interested. So then. That's okay. That's a disease side of things. But then when I started to look, and I realised that lots of problems from epigenetics, toxic stress, etc. Then the fact that these things can be hereditary as well, and can be passed down with. I think it was your paper that I read, or a post of yours that you read about the sperm, about stuff being passed down through sperm to other generations. So. Then when I hear things like that, you say then it's about the social side of things, but sometimes that's going to be inevitable, right? This is a question. That's going to be inevitable, right? If how are we going to expect the societal changes if through epigenetics we're passing down these problems through generations? Yeah.
Hard one to answer. I suppose it's how you approach stressful situations as well. Like my boyfriend and I were having this conversation the other day, and he was saying how PTSD maybe necessarily isn't a bad thing. It's whether it goes on for a chronic period of time, because people need to be put under stress to grow, to learn, to know how to deal with stress. That's why children don't deal with stress very well, but that's why when you're 50 and one of your friends dies, you will most probably deal with that much better than a child will deal with that, because you've learned through the years how to get better at dealing with situations. So and you can't compare stress either, because my 10 out of 10 situation, maybe there was a period in my life where to me something happened and that's a 10 out of 10. You can't then say, well, because she went through something worse, what you've gone through is not that bad, because to you, if you've gone through something that's maybe not as bad on a grand scale of things, in the grand scheme of things, but to you it's still a 10 out of 10.
Of course. Yeah, like situations, obviously my situation is going to be different. I'm going to value things differently. So to put this into a sporting context, let's say when I'm paragliding, I get a big collapse and my paraglider spins and I remain quite cool and calm, and to somebody else, immediately, if they want to go and land, they want it all to be over, they've had enough, because the fear, the amygdala acts differently, the stress response is completely different. So yeah, exactly. Situational experiences are going to make a massive difference.
Yeah. Well, back to the epigenetics and then back to the child psychology. So with the epigenetics, they did a study, and actually my computer crashed. I wanted to have it up so that I could give you the name of it. But they did a study on post-mortem hippocampus of people who had endured suicide victims. The ones who had endured child abuse showed epigenetic changes in the same place in the hippocampus. and the ones that committed suicide but didn't have child abuse had other problems, but they didn't have the epigenetic change that I mentioned, which correlates how it could potentially, have changed things in the system for you to become a certain way when you're older.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So with the
Yeah.
depression, so those kids could have been carrying, genes for depression, and I'm almost certain that probably all of us have the ability to carry those genes, especially in the world we're living in now.
Yeah.
But they all showed the same epigenetic change, which was pretty groundbreaking, because it showed how something that can happen to you as a child, if not dealt with, can and will carry over into your adult life, because everything you do as a child shapes you.
Yeah. Yeah. I that is that I find amazing, because I think if at any point there's going to be a socially acceptable neglect, it's going to be as an early child, because I don't think I think when people hear about neglect, and when you're saying neglect, and when I use really, people are thinking of abandoned children or drunk parents, but neglect can simply be leaving your kid to play on the computer for 4 hours a day, or not, ignoring them when they're trying to talk to you because you're engaged in another conversation.
Not being present, being there but not present.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So back to Piaget. I mean, when you're born to when you're 2 years old, you have your sensorimotor stage, and that is literally everything that is built in the brain comes from the senses. So you'll see kids are touching things, they want to look at things, and they see color and they go, okay, let's process that. So children that are neglected, their brains don't grow as much. And I actually did a post on that a while back. I sent it to you. That was done by a psychiatrist called Dr. Bruce D. Perry. And he actually did brain scans on a neglected 3-year-old versus a normal 3-year-old. And you could see how diminished the brain was.
Yeah.
And the neglected child.
So that post, sorry to cut you off, that post that you did post, the brains are very contrasting sizes, as well as the internal development of the brains different. Were the brains actually different sizes through growth, or was it just the internal workings of the brains had not developed as well?
Well, probably both. So what's probably happened is the neurons are there, they're ready, and I'll come back to that in a sec, but they're ready to learn. But if there's no synapses being made, then there's no need for the head to grow. You see, so the more synaptic transmission there is, the more it's going to grow to a normal.
So the actual physical differences in growth as well.
Yeah, in both. Yeah. So, which was mind blowing. So yeah, sensorimotor stage. It's they take everything in. So the brain is kind of like, it has little allocations for everything. So you're born, and the frontal cortex is for higher thinking. The hippocampus is for memory, and etc. But within those within the frontal lobe, there are more specialized areas. So language, thinking, emotion, empathy, love, those type of emotions as well. So children that are neglected or abused, and that part of the brain doesn't completely develop, something else is going to take over, because the brain is always going to want to be optimal. So something else will take over. Whatever it is, we don't know. It could be language, it could be maths, they might be crazy mathematicians, sometimes it's disease, or but what I'm trying to say is that when they are older, if they never felt love, if they never had someone touching them, that sensory information never came in, so that part of the brain never developed properly. So when they grow up, they might be able to learn the theory of love, but they won't necessarily be able to innately feel love the way that someone like you and I would, because we were nurtured when we had that sensory motor input. And sensory motor means that you bring in the senses, and then you create a motor output out of it, which is exactly what the eyes do, what the mouth does, what the hands do. So yeah, that blew my mind when I read that, because I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's people. So my translation to that a little bit is I look at it more like sociopaths are not bred, they're developed. It's sociopathic behavior is a learned behavior almost, or a lack of learning.
Well, there was a case of this child who was adopted from Russia, by, I can't remember, I think it was an American family, because I remember reading he lived in
I know
New
the
York.
story you're gonna say, yeah, this is a cool story.
Yeah, okay, so you've read that. So this kid, well, this baby, because it was an orphanage where it was just overloaded, they didn't have enough people to deal with them. So they would deal them with in terms of like, okay, feeding, sleep, this, that, change. There was no kind of care and nurture and love, so they never actually got held enough. And this baby got adopted at like before it was even 2 years old, so he wouldn't even have been able to remember that. And this family that adopted him, he became a murderer, and they couldn't understand why he was the way he was, because they'd given him a lot of love, and he had a brother, and he was fine, and everything was fine, and they just couldn't understand where it went wrong. And when he started seeing a psychiatrist, they took it all the way back to when he was born, and those parts of the brain just didn't develop correctly.
Yeah, it's
So
it's crazy. I think that's crazy because for so long, the medical profession has tried to treat these things as if they're diseases or illnesses that you catch, or that that just come out of nowhere, or you're born with, that they can control.
yeah,
And when in reality, if we can start to have a look at the psychological and social aspects of
yeah,
what developed, then I think we're much more likely to not cure these problems, prevent them, which is going to be a lot better in the long run.
yeah, prevent them, and then potentially even have better ways of dealing with them. So children that are placed in loving homes after traumatic, well, children that are in loving homes after a traumatic event are normally much better at recovering than children who after traumatic event aren't. So if I, or you say I'm in a loving home and something really bad happens to my family, if I'm loved by the people around me, then I will most likely be able to recover. And they did that with some kids who were badly abused and then put in nurturing homes and by foster care, and they thrived, because it was how they dealt. And again, it comes back to how you deal with stress, how you approach it, how you try and get better from it. Because I'm not saying everyone needs to be abused, but stress does help us grow, and it's how you can change it around. And I think that was the same thing with me growing up, as with my stepfather. Instead of being like, well, he's an alcoholic, it was more like, why are you an alcoholic? Where is this coming from? Why you have a lovely home? And it's just it's yeah.
So, you may or may not agree. I believe these instances manifest ourselves in two different ways, or what, multiple different ways. But if we look at the extremities,
Yeah,
you have all the things that the bad things, like the alcoholism, drug addicts, sociopathic killers, all the things that are quite extreme end. And then you go to the other end. I think it's exactly the same thing, but ingenious. So when it comes to like Mozart, or anyone who's considered a genius in something,
yeah.
I think it's exactly the same thing happening, but just
I agree. And I also agree that probably someone who is such a genius would wish to be a little bit more normal and have better social interactions, because maybe they can't interact with humans, but that's why they're so smart. Well, I don't know if smart, yeah, geniuses.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I totally agree with that statement completely. Yeah. Another reason, the neuroscience part and to nature nurture, is, I think, this is what we know of. But for example, do you remember Ted Bundy?
Yeah.
Who went on and killed like all of America? But he had a great upbringing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic upbringing. Nothing went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's like, now this, was there a brain lesion somewhere, or yeah. So that was really interesting, and that's kind of why I'm like,
I mean, a perceived good
yes,
upbringing. This is the thing.
yes,
So I mean, I think basic neglect will come down to opinion, but basic neglect could be the fact that you want your mother's attention every single day, and you're not
Like
getting
you
it.
said
You've got
earlier.
food, you've got money, you've got everything you want, but you have all these instances like you want your mother's attention, or you see your friends out playing in the street every day, and you're told you can't because you've got to watch out for pedophiles, and then all this stuff can just
no, 100%, and that's why I said, as we can see, he had but I mean, people do suffer from crazy things, from brain lesions, something that they maybe bump their heads, and then it has adverse effects. I can't think of any rigid explanation.
So there was the guy in America who went on a killing spree, right? And he wrote a suicide note, and he said, I know I'm going to do something bad. I want you to study my brain afterwards because I'm sure there's something wrong with me. And he went out and shot a load of people, and then so they did in the post-mortem, in the autopsy, they studied his brain, and he had like a tumor about the size of like a dime or something. He had a tumor on his brain. I don't know if it was on the hippocampus. Maybe on the hippocampus, and they had a tumor, and they said 100% it would have been causing pressure on the part of the brain responsible for anger and frustration, temper. I think it's strange that he knew
the
that.
temporal lobe, which is the amygdala. You mentioned that earlier. The amygdala, the insula. The insula is responsible for making you want to do things, so it like sparks desire, amongst other things. But so that could have come from that the desire to want to hurt someone, alongside the rage and the anger, coming from the amygdala. So that's I'm not surprised.
I remember that guy's name now, but it's like a really famous case in America. He just went off and like a killing spree. So what I'd like to, before we go on further, because like I'll get lost in this. I'll go on. What I want to cover is is the breakdown of understanding how neurological pathways work and stuff, because people hear stuff like synapses and stuff and how they develop. And if I'm correct, the synapses should be considered as the gap between that's the link that makes So the way that I understand it, and I'm going to put this out there so you can call me a fool and correct me.
No, you've actually impressed me. This is great.
Oh, thanks. So I think the best way that I've understood it is to think of it like a tree root system, right? Your brain is your brain, and it's a place where, let's say you were to grab a ball with all these little like grooves in it, that would be your brain. It's not going to work unless the roots of the tree grow between those bits and they link everything up together. Those tree roots are the synapses, So the way that it works is when we learn, we program the messages to come back. They then go through the synapses to your brain. Your brain makes the link, and the more times you do that, the stronger the connection gets, and your brain learns to do those things more efficiently.
That's it. And it's called long-term potentiation.
Mm-hmm.
So when you send a signal to another neuron, so your presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, that's pretty standard. The more you send that signal, the better the postsynaptic. What did I just call it? Oh my god, I've had a brain fart. Postsynaptic neuron. The postsynaptic neuron becomes at receiving the information from the presynaptic neuron. So what it will start doing is it will start creating more receptors on that surface to receive better the information, and that neuron is going to get better at sending the information. So that's long-term potentiation, and that's the same concept as positive thinking, and not just positive thinking, but that's how I like to relate it back. So if you constantly think negatively, or you're constantly thinking about something in a certain way, their brain is going to get better at sending those messages the way you've been sending them, and the receiving neurons are just strengthening the connection between these thoughts. So thoughts can strengthen, and just the way that basic needs can strengthen. So basic love and language, and all those things can strengthen. But the way we think, and the memory, if you think about a memory long enough, it's going to become a bigger, a more stronger memory that you can recall way better if you think about something a lot. Whereas if you just see a bird flying by, that's a nice color, you'll see it, you'll think, oh, that's a nice bird. If someone comes to you and says, did you see a bird that was really pretty? You'd be like, oh yeah, but you're not going to think about that all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yes.
if something you see that catches your eye and you think about it long enough, it eventually goes from short-term memory to long-term memory because it's been potentiated enough. And then you'll be able to recall that much better. But if you also then have another memory, is so confusing because there's like semantic memory, episodic memory, but I'll try to keep it simple. But you know, you could have a memory that you then forget about, and that's still there, but because you've not thought about it a lot, it's not as strong. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it makes complete sense. I think you're doing really well, because you're I mean, I'm sure you could talk about this at a level that all of your peers and people within the industry would be cool with, but you now need to talk about it with someone who's had most of the intelligence punched out of their ears. So
no.
you're doing brilliantly. So what I hear from that is that something like neural linguistic programming and NLP and stuff, that's the reason that works so well, is because visualization of the same physical process can be just as good, because you're creating it just in visualization. You're creating those the neurons to produce more, so the synapses are there, and the other neurons are creating more receptors just by visualization of the same process.
Is that visualization of an object, or?
No, so let's say I'm shooting basketballs, free throws, basketballs. So let's say I do that 100 times a day. Cool.
Yeah.
But let's say I now visualize doing that 1,000 times a day, never using the motor skill, like never using my muscular physical.
Did you read my post?
No, which post?
Okay. Yeah, carry on.
So NLP, and there was a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz that I read years ago.
Write that down. Psycho-Cybernetics.
Yeah, Maxwell Maltz. So I read these books years ago. So doing that process, like visualization of the actual thing that you know how to do physically, almost be as beneficial as the actual physical practice.
Yeah. So I wrote a post on this. There was a guy, I can't remember his name. I actually wanted to research it before I came here so that I could be prepared, but then computer drama. But he did a study where he had 3 groups. One control group, so they did absolutely nothing. Group number 1 had to learn a 5-finger piece on the piano, and group number 2 had to imagine that they were learning the 5-finger piece on the piano without actually doing it. They taught them the notes, and they taught them how they would do it. And the guys who had to imagine it and the guys who had to do it had just about the same amount of brain activity on a brain imaging scan, which is exactly what you're saying. So
So the example that I used was but it was, I think it's in it might be Maxwell Maltz's book. It could be in something like Outliers or something. But it was an example of basketball teams. They took one group who were allowed to practice their normal amount a day. One group had to practice physically double the amount a day. And then they... Oh, sorry. That's because I'm an NHS responder, so they've just messaged me.
Oh, right. Oh, lovely.
So one group practiced the same amount a day, one group practiced physically the double the amount a day, and one group practiced only visualization, but they weren't allowed to miss a basket. They had to make a shot every single time. And I will use figures here that are just random, but they're to represent the actual figures. Let's say the ones who practice normal, theirs increased by 1% a day, because if you just practice a certain amount, you'll get better. The guys who practice double, they increased by, let's say, 12%. And the guys who did no practice whatsoever visualization was something like 11%. So almost exactly the amount as the people who practice double.
Yeah, it's the same concept.
Yeah, and so that stuck with me. And when you talk about these, the only reason I mention it is because that helped me to really sort of understand the way that the synapses and those neurological links work. So people who listen to this who are fighters might find it easier. I mean, the way that you've said it is brilliant, and it's
no, that's a good point, because I was trying to find a way to describe it in a more tangible way, and that was perfect. And I'd forgotten about the other paper, so thank you for bringing that up, because it just kind of puts it a bit more into reality. How and actually, I think that when I'm doing ballet, so if I imagine myself doing ballet, everything's on the right leg. The left leg is just there. It kind of exists. But when you put me on the bar, the same thing happens. My right leg, I can get that leg up there, but my left one is just like, meh. And I'm almost certain that it's also yes, because I don't train it enough. And when I'm showing you something, I'm probably going to show you with my right leg. So my left leg's more balanced. My right leg is more nimble. I mean, that thing can go like that sometimes. And yeah, and I do think that sometimes I try and imagine myself doing the bar on the left-hand side, and it doesn't feel as smooth in my brain as it does on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
I could picture the whole bar on the right-hand side, no problem. But as soon as I have to picture myself doing it with the left leg, it almost feels a bit clanky, like, And I'm almost certain that it's connected. And I'm sure it is. And
Yeah, must be. There
I mean,
must be the link.
obviously there's, yeah, well, also the muscles are connected to the brain. So, there's a lot of, of that. So, yeah.
Because this is the next bit that I find really interesting, is that conversely, the negative thoughts can have a negative neurological effect. As much as the positive thoughts can have a positive effect, the negative can actually have a negative neurological impact.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, yeah.
I find that absolutely crazy, that just by thinking negatively, you can get your body to respond negatively.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. Because I think what a lot of people maybe don't know, and I read a book years ago now, and it was a TV series, but I've never seen the TV series, by Dr. David Eagleman. It was called The Brain. The book was really good. I'm not sure what the TV series was like. And I had a complete brain fart then. I've lost exactly.
Yeah, no, sometimes it happens to me.
I can't believe oh yeah, so the brain. The brain is like, what people don't understand is the brain is just sat in this dark room. It can't feel anything, hear anything, has no senses. The brain does nothing but become a platform for all these neurons
to come in.
Yeah, so there's like smell, taste, color, everything is created by the connections between what your eyes see, how your hands, and connection that makes to the brain. And I saw a post from yours talking about people having operations on their brain, and that's why people don't have any anesthetic when they have operations on their.
Well, they put local on the head for the skin and for the layers and the bone. But they don't actually anesthetize the brain, because if someone had to put their finger on your brain, you wouldn't be able to feel that, because you'd need another brain for the receptors to tell that brain that something's being touched.
Yeah, I find that like that.
Yeah. When I found that out, I was like, well, that's obvious, but wow.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I first read that, it was one of those moments where I had to move the book away, and I'm like,
whoa.
Because you think of the brain like a muscle or like anything, it's like you think it's doing something, and I mean obviously it is doing something, but the way that I think of the brain now is just the brain's just the platform. Everything that plugs into it is the relevant stuff. We marvel at the brain, and people look over the neurological processes that are actually making that organ work.
Yeah, well, that brings us back to your developmental stages, which is exactly what is happening. The brain takes things in, and then it creates a pathway, and then it grows the brain.
Yeah.
And then because kids, for example, they don't know that they don't have an impact on the world. When they're babies, they don't understand that if you remove an object out of sight, that it's still there. They have to learn that. They have to learn, the meaning of things. So you give them a wedding ring, they're going to be like, this is round, this is gold, this is pretty. They will grow up to learn the meaning behind something like that. So yeah, the brain is very, very complex, but also in some ways, no, it's still complex. I had to think about that. Like, no, it's still very complex.
There's a certain reason people like you can go on and become neuroscientists, and people like me are not going to be neuroscientists, because it is very complex.
I reckon you could do it. By the way you're talking and the way you feel about it, I think you could definitely do it. Because I think if you want something bad enough, you could definitely do it. It's just
I love it. I'm in love with if you start talking to me about, I love psychology more so, because I think it's about that's more about the inputs and the outputs
Yeah.
from the stuff that. So that's more like the result of the trauma or the result of the positivity in the brain. So I like the psychology because you have to deal with the manifestation of all those things.
Yeah.
So I love the psychology aspect, but because my mum obviously had MS, I do find it really interesting. Then when I started reading, I was just like, wow, this is like a minefield. This can go on forever, you know?
Well, that's why I want to put the two together, because I do think they interlink a lot. And I actually like the psychology side of it more. Like sometimes I'm doing lab practicals where I have to like pipette things into other things. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, so sometimes it does get a little bit too neuroscience-y for me. And I'm just like, oh, I hate science. Like, I don't hate science, but I kind of hate science. Like all the background stuff of it, like the research papers and the experiments, but you're like pipetting things. I want tangible things. I want, like the psychology side of things. But then again, that's such a silly thing for me to say, because you still have to do that in psychology. You still have to, maybe not pipette things, but still do.
You would probably as well, if you started like immersing yourself in psychology, just psychology, when you start reading like review studies and stuff, you'd probably just be like, there's only so much of this. Like, I want to put pet stuff into shit again.
Yeah, because you always want what you don't have.
Definitely. I mean, I do. So I can do 6 jiu-jitsu classes a week, and I think, at least I'm not getting punched in the face. And then as soon as I'm on like my 10th jiu-jitsu class, I think I can't wait to get punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's just
like that.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go back to the things that you're passionate about, the things that you love. Do you think you can expand any more on epigenetics? Because I think that we did cover that, but I think if we can maybe expand it slightly, because I think this is where people can really change their child's future, even if they haven't got a kid now. It's probably better if you don't have a kid, because you're not trying to undo some mistakes. And listen, this isn't. I'm not being a preacher, because we're all going to do it, because we live in a world and a society where some things are unavoidable. But I think when it comes down to epigenetics, I think people don't realise that mild forms of neglect can manifest themselves physically in the realms of like heart problems, breathing problems, asthma. And then you get, and this isn't even the real severe neglect or abuse we're talking about. Sometimes this is mild abuse and mild neglect that's manifesting itself that way.
Yeah, well, there was another study done with mice, and they actually traumatized these mice with a certain smell, and that had an impact on the OLF51. That's just the receptor name of the receptor that took in the smell. But they hadn't had offspring yet, but then they reproduced. And even the third generation, so that mice's grandchildren, still had a fear of the smell. So they were particularly afraid of it, but they were unsettled around it. The cortisol levels went up, and they had never had been put in a situation where the smell was around until they did the experiments, which that blew my mind, because I thought, okay, well, that mice's mice, the father of that mice's father had been traumatized by something, and now this one is being affected by it. So it kind of proves how things can be passed down through generations. I did a little bit on obesity as well. I can't remember exactly what I touched base on in that, but I'm pretty sure it came down to something like the people who had obese parents were more likely to put on weight. I need to get my facts straight on that one. I wrote the paper, so I should
You need to go and have a word with yourself and just make sure that you're right.
You remember that part when I said to you that the memory is a very complex system? Yeah, that's it. But yeah, that kind of blew my mind a little bit. The epigenetic changes in the guys that committed suicide, and the epigenetic changes in the mice from something that they weren't even around. So it shows that people's memories can potentially be passed down through DNA, and the way you see things, the way you look at things, and maybe even the things that you've gone through can potentially affect definitely your offspring, potentially even their offspring.
Yeah, which I mind blowing, absolutely crazy. But because for me, the biggest takeaway from me is I have a real problem with medication in children, especially around things like ADHD and behavior problems, which they were never as bad in the UK, but they're now getting to the point where we're starting to become a bit more like America, and we are like medicating kids. And I think that a lot of the time you're medicating children to limit the effects of something for now, and basically you're just putting a plaster over something.
Yes, I was going to say that you're just putting a plaster on it. You're not actually sorting out the problem.
Exactly. So when these become adolescents or even adults, and they suddenly think, well, I don't need this medication. When the medication's gone, they then think they depend on the medication as an adult because they don't know the problems that it was that they were actually suppressing just for the medication.
And also, they probably have grown up with this label to say you've got ADHD. So now they've gone their whole life believing that they're a certain type of person that needs to be, treated a certain type of way. And then they realize that maybe that isn't the case, and they needed to sort out this problem. And then that would have been, I'm trying to think. I read a paper not literally a week ago. I think this woman had a child, but she had grown up in the system and in foster care. So she didn't really know much about love and affection. So when she had a daughter, that kid, I wrote it down actually, because I wanted to bring up some hard facts. Yeah, she weighed 26 pounds at the age of 4. And this kid could just not put on any weight. And like the mother would feed her, she wasn't neglecting her, but I guess she was emotionally, like you said, even though she was still nurturing and giving her the things, because she didn't know how to feel love. She didn't know how to pass that love on to her daughter. So she was 4 years old at 26 pounds. What's that, like 10 kilograms? I don't know how much kids are meant to weigh, but that sounds like it's not okay. And they went through all these, like a plethora of tests to figure out what was wrong with the digestive system, what was wrong with her, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, she ended up going to a psychiatrist who took down the history of the mother and then started putting these things together. And they started doing work with her regarding love and affection and putting her in like specific classes that would help her socialize with children and be in a nurturing environment. Even though her mother wasn't abusing her, the body just couldn't function and it couldn't do the things that it needed to do. So there were pathways in the brain that didn't develop properly to tell the body to grow, and it was hindering not only her psyche, but also her physical anatomy.
Yeah, that's which is again absolutely crazy that someone who's not particularly being neglected or even massively, I mean they're just not getting the love that other children are getting just because that parent doesn't realize what the love. So damage from a previous is being passed down, and this time I guess being passed down not so much even in the neurological, being passed down in the physical and emotional sense. Having the same impact. I find that I find it really believable, but at the same time it's unbelievable. I hear that. I do find it shocking.
I mean, this sounds crazy, and one day I said this out of anger, and I said it to my boyfriend. I was like, people should go through a course before they're allowed to have children.
I agree.
Which I know it sounds like one of those, like I'm being one of those marks, like people need to be educated, but people I think don't realize how much impact they have on their children, because they don't know how much impact they've had on their parents had on them. Or let alone even think about science or neuroscience or psychology or even being able to put things together. I mean, we've just put so many things together with other things in this whole chat that we've had that other people don't do. They don't correlate anything. They just see what's in front of them and probably don't even ponder on it for more than 5 minutes before they
are you talking about in society or within the field or within each field of
in society? In society, in the field, but mostly in society that they don't. I don't think there's enough education on impact.
So I think this is that pro-choice thing about abortions and stuff that I don't. So you know, you should abortion should be available. It should be there, because you may have a promiscuous young teenage girl that's suffering from all the problems from when she was a child.
Yeah.
That's manifested itself in being promiscuous because she seeks the love, she seeks the attention. That attention, she's chosen to put it out there by drawing attraction from boys, and she gets pregnant. Now, what you're going to force that person to have a child, and then what do you think the future is for the child that's going to come from that? So I think this is where the ignorance comes in from people. They see everything is so black and white, and they don't look deeper and think, hang on a minute, what the knock-on effect of this mother having the one child was that this child is now grown up and acted promiscuously. What would the knock-on effect be for the third generation? So I think this is the stupidity of how it gets so one-track minded.
Well, also the brain has a thing called mirror neurons. That's why if you smile at a baby, the baby will smile back at you, because it picks up on the mother and everything that's going on around them. And it's the same with me and you. If I start smiling now, you're probably going to start smiling. If I'm pulling a sad face, you're definitely not going to smile, and if you do, you're a bad person. But you know, there are mirror neurons, and on top of that, the brain it kind of makes like memory templates of everything. So if you're walking down the street and you see a car driving down on the left hand side, it doesn't even reach your higher cortex, your higher senses. It just goes directly to the cerebellum and goes, okay, does that match with what we've seen before? Yes, it does. There's nothing wrong with that car. Go. If there's a car driving on the right hand side of the road, the wrong way around for us in England, I'm in Portugal now, so actually this doesn't make much sense to me, but to you guys, the car's driving on the wrong hand side of the road, the brain is going to be like, no, there's something wrong here, because it doesn't match that memory template. So your brain is doing that all day long. Like the amount of energy we use on a daily basis without us even knowing it, because we have autonomic senses and autonomic functions. That brain is taking things and, you know, checking. Is this normal? It doesn't even reach your high, the frontal lobe. When something goes wrong, it does. And that's when you're like, oh, alert, there's something wrong here. And that's the same thing with behavior, is that, you know, if children that are either sexually abused, they will probably grow up to be, not always, I don't want to generalize, but they will probably grow up to be prostitutes. And if they do, it's because that memory template's a little bit fuzzy. It's like,
or abusers themselves. High percentage of people who have been abused.
That's what they know.
Exactly.
That's the memory template that the brain has created for them. And that's the same thing with kids. So you made the example of the child who was abused or promiscuous. That kid's going to see what's going on in the mother and think that that's potentially normal. The brain is primitive.
And a lot of kids exaggerate their parents' behavior because we inherently want to be a better version of what we grow up to, because that's how evolution works. That's how everybody should be. If you should be looking to better your previous generation, otherwise evolution's not working. So if you see a mother that's promiscuous or aggressive, or generally when you grow up, and I say generally, I have no percentage figure to put on this, so I am maybe out of turn. But I'm going to use the word generally because I've done it now. So generally, the people will grow, the offspring will grow up to be more aggressive, more promiscuous, because every generation wants to be better than the previous generation, because that's natural evolution of the species.
So that brings you back to also why I wanted to study neuroscience, because I want to know why. Who's someone like, I don't know, take person A who went through something really traumatic, maybe their parents committed suicide, and then you take person B who had a nice upbringing, but maybe their father was a little bit absent, but now the person B who didn't have such a severe traumatic childhood grows up to be an alcoholic. But that child who had gone through all that trauma doesn't. And I want to know, why do some people come out of experiences okay, and why do other people's not? And sometimes they're not correlated to the level of stress that they've endured.
So, so sometimes there's a lot more social input and stuff that needs to be brought in as well, as opposed to just stress being linked. And I think so. What you're saying is that you want to merge the things together and not make it so secular. It doesn't have to just be neuroscience. It doesn't have to just be psychology. It doesn't have to be both of them. It could be sociology. It can be an experiment from all
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics,
Which falls under, a different field of studying. So yeah.
I think I think you have a very I think the way you're looking at, I think it's probably a good thing as well that you decided to go into education when you did, because you've probably, if you would have gone off the back of, say you're 17, you're off the back of what you've experienced from your stepdad, etc., you're going to carry a lot of emotional weight in with you, and you're going to approach the situation in one way and then probably maybe get funneled into following something. But when you've been a little bit older and you've been able to experiment, I'm not saying you have, but with drugs, with alcohol, with emotional relationships, sexual relationships, you have a lot more stuff to draw on. And then so by the time you get to 27, you're like, I want to do this. When you start doing it, then when you start seeing how broad it can be, you're like, I want to do this, this, and this, and I want to make this work. And I think that's a great thing that you like, because I think we force our kids into choosing what they want to be, or we force kids into choosing what they want to be or how they want to be way too young, like way too young, like.
Agreed.
What you say about studying kids and the effects? What age do you think those effects will stop having a big impact? Do you think we're talking by the age of, say, 5, the damage is done, or it's continually done up until X amount of time?
I think it can always not be changed, but I think there's many ways of looking at a situation. So George's mother is a psychologist, and we get into these crazy conversations sometimes because we got a neuroscientist and a psychologist in the house. And I was saying how with what happened to me, you can look at it positively or you can look at it negatively. So I think if you can teach someone perhaps a theory that we've just been talking about, and let them understand why things happen, maybe not letting them understand that what happened isn't because of them, or what happened is teaching them that maybe their aggressor, the person that was inflicting trauma, maybe trying to let them understand that they were going through something. So I don't know. It's a broad question, because I think, yes, to some extent the damage is done, like that kid who was adopted and he didn't even know that had happened to him. So I think up to a certain extent, if I think in your sensorimotor stage, the beginning to when you're 2 years old, there's a lot of sensory input, and I think that's really important to not mess up. So it's hard to say, but I feel like maybe if you knew about it, maybe if you knew that that's why the kid was going to become, a sociopath and murder someone and not feel any pain towards it, and you knew that he had, gone through that stage where he didn't have love, if you knew that you could fix that, then maybe there would be a way to, I don't know. It's a broad question.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I feel like you and I would talk and hypothesize for hours and hours about that subject.
I think if you know things, you probably have a better chance of surviving, and that I think falls in any category, because if the more you know, or try and know or understand or think about trying to understand, then you have a better chance of understanding where other people are coming from, understanding yourself. That's obviously where like meditation comes in, and just being in touch. But I think that comes from knowing, and I think if you know what happened, why it happened, and reasons why whatever these neurological changes happen, then I think you could potentially survive, learn, thrive. I don't know what you want to call it.
I think also what you're probably demonstrating as well is the lack of research in the field over a long period of time. So like people have wanted to say study serial killers because they want to know about serial killers, and then the more they study serial killers and sociopaths, they realize that these people a lot of the time get no feeling out of what they do. They don't get excited by it. They don't get, it's like, how did you feel? And they're like, I didn't feel anything. And it's not, and I think
that you have to follow that serial killer from, say, if you're doing it from when he's a child to when he's older, you have to follow that through for how many years, and how many variables and how many implications are there in a study like that, when you have to make sure that that person is still in contact with you, or that you can still study them, or
well, also it's the thing of, so this is me. I have no idea about the advancement of neuroscience. No idea about the advancement of epigenetics. I don't know anything about that. I read books, but I don't know the
I don't
history.
think scientists do either, to be honest.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what's going on.
So for me, I think if you've got, say, we'll use Ted Bundy as the example, just because he came up earlier. So we've got Ted Bundy. He commits all these crimes. He gets caught. He's Ted Bundy. People start to study him. They look at Ted Bundy and they look at all the things that go wrong. But a lot of the time, I feel like these people are going to study Ted Bundy from the moment Ted Bundy can demonstrate a personality, maybe say 3 or 4. So that's when you can start to demonstrate traits from these. So they'll say, right, okay, well, let's look how he behaved in nursery school. And part of me wants to say, you've missed the biggest area. Like the bit you're not studying is the bit you can't study because you've got no way of doing. But that was the most important bit.
Well, I think that's what that Dr. Bruce D. Perry did in that book, is that he showed how important something that happened when a baby was 0 to 2 years old was so important. But everyone overlooked it because they thought, well, he's not going to remember that. You're a child. You probably, and that brings us full circle. And that's, if you know, you can change. And if you educate people, they can change how they bring up their children. I feel like a bit of a hypocrite because I've never had a child. So.
Oh, no, I think I would say you're best placed to speak on this over a mass percentage of people who actually do have children.
Right.
Because lots of people will probably have children and have they raise them and don't even think that it's, lots of people have kids. I've seen lots of people have kids and it's an accessory. It's like having a puppy, or it's like having a...
Yeah, or to get benefits.
All sorts of stuff.
And they just think that they're just there and they can control them. That's what annoys me as well, when a parent goes, because I said so. That really grates my skin, because children have a lot, they don't, and parents just push them down like that by not even giving them a personality or allowing them to be. And that again brings us back to when you said that maybe they just seek an attention from their mother by something so simple as just listen to me.
Yeah, like to be an authoritarian should come with like a respect. It shouldn't be, I'm older than you, I'm your parent, you do as you're told. You should set an example and explain why you are the authoritarian, and then that never needs to come into question, because it's not because I said so. It's like, well, and what am I got to go through life now that everyone who tells me to do something I have to act?
I'm just like, okay, I'm a yes man now.
Yeah, exactly. Another area that you may not have, and feel free to say I've not really looked at it, it's not really something I've thought about. I have, on a few of these podcasts before, I've spoken openly about my disdain for the curriculum, for the education system, and curriculum-based education. And I think that basing our child's, through society and for education, rewarding people and telling them how good they are, how much of an achievement they make based on a curriculum, I think is massively flawed, and I don't think enough time is spent on individual development of personality and stuff. I don't know if that makes sense.
I agree, because we measure your maths, for example, so greatly compared to their personality or other things. So no, I totally agree with that. I don't think that we should be doing that. George and I were talking about a school recently, about where kids get scaffolded. I don't know exactly what it was called. I'll have to ask him, he's inside somewhere. But where they scaffold their beliefs and they help them learn things, but they don't actually interject that much, which is supposedly meant to have children thriving and learning how to be in the world, because we're teaching children maths, English, science, whatever, but then you put them in the big bad world and they're like, I don't know how to function.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I saw when I went to university. I mean, I remember on my first day, there was this girl who was trying to get a drink out of a vending machine, and we were clearly in the same group because we'd just come out of the lecture theatre. And I said to her, oh, do you want a pound? And she just was like, blah, blah. I was like, you want a pound? And she was like, she just didn't answer me. And I was like, I'm fucking talking to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to be like confident enough to say yes or no.
Yeah.
And also to give someone an answer. But I think that because children are on their phones so much, and this is going off another tangent, they don't really know how to converse anymore with people and how to be in real situations.
I think even young adults were seeing that now. I think so. If I go back to when I was say 17, 18, 19, going to nightclubs, guys would talk to girls would talk to guys. Now I see, because I was a doorman for so long, now I see guys talk to girls, and like you can see girls are almost like, oh, what do I do? Someone spoke to me, like, and it's almost like they want to say, take my Snapchat and message me. It's like,
Yeah.
I can be someone behind my phone, but I haven't learned how to be me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it in a conversation, I think there's something like 7% is words, and then whatever, I think it's 21% is tone, and the rest is body language. So if you think about it, if people are talking to each other on a phone, I don't think that you only get 7% of the conversation, because that's not true, because you can actually pick up tone and some kind of body language through messages. But people are talking through these devices where you're only typing words. So the rest of it is forgotten. And you see, and I do it as well, I go, ha ha ha, that's hilarious, but I'm not actually laughing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so context is massively lost when it's in a written format, and then you miss out. Like, language is beautiful. Like, it's one of the most, like, Shakespeare and these people wrote about language. It's beautiful. How are we neglecting one of the most beautiful things that's been created over thousands of years? We're neglecting it to all put BRB and LOL.
Yeah.
Like, these are all, yeah, it just doesn't mean anything. It's like, come on, like, where's the personality got? And so for me, it's like, so my thing is, I don't believe in talent. This is my thing. I don't believe in talent. There's lots of books been written, the talent code, etc. And people are like, oh, well, you can't say that everyone has the potential to be the same as everyone else. And I'm like, well, I can, but you're looking at it too broadly. Now, I can't be LeBron James because I'm not 7 foot. My ability to athletically perform like him is obviously very different. So, yes. But what you will find is LeBron James wasn't born to be a basketball player.
No, of course.
LeBron James was born with attributes which will suit a certain group of things. And there might be 35 things, let's say. It could be anything athletic. Yeah, it could be anything athletic. It could be many different things. But his attributes suit that. Then when you put together his upbringing, the way that he was brought up, he was, okay, not the best upbringing. He was on the streets a lot playing basketball, but his parents always supported him to do well in school. Now, you can be a great basketball player. If you don't do well in school, you don't make the team, because that's how it works in America. So you might be held back as well. So I look at it as every single person in the world is born with the same ability to achieve greatness within their attributes. Now, this is where Vygotsky comes back into it, is that he's saying that you're born and you have this immediate circle of people who influence you, your family, and they're the first people to influence you. Then you have this like outer wave of the people who influence you, who very much of the time we don't think of, like, your friends and stuff, how much influence do they have, and I'm talking at an early age again, kids, like really kids, preschool kids. And then you get the next wave, which then includes society and stuff. Well, what we've done, I think, personally, is we've brought that third wave in closer by giving like iPads and TV and stuff, and I think that until we catch up, we can't keep relying on psychologists and doctors to figure this out. I think society, as a parent, we need to.
Yeah, and people need to as well. And hopefully by having conversations like this, people will, open up a little bit more and realize. And I think that it is steering towards that direction, I hope. I think maybe I'm living in my own little bubble where people are starting to become a little bit more educated on the impacts of social media and like you said, that third wave that shouldn't really have that much of an impact on you now has a direct impact on you. And I think on top of that, the phones that, and then like you said, school, who merit you on good behavior and good good grades and maths, and don't really look at anything else. We're shaping children not to be fuck ups, excuse my language, but to have problems in the world where they have to figure things out for themselves, which can be a positive thing. But I feel like people need to change so that society can change, so that our children can thrive without having to go through all these obstacles. And it's almost like, did I figure it out, flick, or did I not figure it out? And I feel like the ones that didn't figure it out are still taking selfies and posting a photo of themselves every day on Instagram.
Yeah.
I have a problem with girls who pout and will like, and that's, and you look at their Instagram and that's all they've got on their Instagram. I'm like, babe.
Yeah, exactly. Because
there are so many books in the world, and there is a freaking like whole universe out there, and you just decided to pout like that. And then on top of that, because of the quarantine, we're all self-timering now as well. Self-time is just like,
also though, we're rewarding this behavior now because we're making these people millionaires and calling them influencers. You're not. If you are influencing, something's gone wrong. If this is what is influencing the next generation,
you're idolizing those people. But then there are people who don't have that many followers who are doing the same thing. For what? Because maybe they have one person who's looking at their Instagram and they want that one person to see how pretty they are. And we know you're pretty. You don't have to. Beauty doesn't need to seek for attention, I think. And I hope that the followers that see this don't think that they're not allowed to post photos of themselves. That's not what I'm saying. Because, and I think athletic things are great. I mean, I have my ballet teacher. She's always posting like her handstands. And I'm like, just keep posting more of that stuff because that's inspiring and it's amazing. But I do have a little bit of a problem. And maybe I'm being a bit narrow-minded with people who just post photos of themselves. But in like a narcissistic, I need attention.
So listen, one of my favorite posts from yours the other day. Like I'm like intrigued and obsessed by your ballet stuff as well. Like when you were trying to get your extension, you were talking about your extension the other day. Like I'll look at that picture and analyze where your leg is and stuff. And I love that because anyone who's doing what you're doing, that doesn't come from you having to go at ballet. That comes from a passion and an obsession with ballet I don't know how long you've done ballet, but so that comes from a passion. And so I'm a sucker for anyone who's passionate about anything.
That's something, exactly. I think that's what it is. It's like, are you passionate about what you're doing? And are you, is that selfie? Is that what you're passionate about? And if you are, then maybe you need to take a look. But the thing is, we can't blame people because that is just the way society goes. If you've got loads of photos of yourself, you're more likely going to have more followers. And then the more followers you have, the more money you're going to make because now you can post a photo with that outfit from Misguided and you get paid for it. So it's like the
more people patting you on the back and saying, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, you get the likes, That's another thing. It's like the little like button. The likes, the comments, it all feeds back into... I think it comes from insecurity, and I feel like I wrote that post recently on did you read it, Voyager 1 and 2? It's a spaceship.
Yes, I did. The golden record.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd heard of the golden record before, and what I wanted to do was, because another thing that massively interests me is space and stuff. So when you posted the golden record,
I feel like we were destined to be friends and have this conversation.
Must be. But I thought the bit that you posted, the conceptual things about space travel and time and distance are what get me. They're the things because I think anyone can quantify it, because you can't quantify it because it's so massive. And then the best bit of that whole post was when you said, if you resisted blinking, you still wouldn't be able to see it. Anyone can quantify that. Anyone can say, well, what can I see? And I could run my hand past, I still saw it. How much faster?
That's how quick it is. And for me, relativity is a big interest of mine as well, because things, and then this correlates back to neuroscience or psychology or social psychology, whatever you want to think of, but relativity, how things in front of you are relative, and then we forget about all these things that are going on in the planet, and then you're obsessing over girls over Instagram and their bikinis, thinking, I wish I was a little bit slimmer, I wish I was a little bit more, wish my extension was a bit higher, and then you think, in I think it was 73 or 77, scientists literally had to plan that these 4 planets would align perfectly with each other, so that Voyager 1 and 2 could literally bounce off each planet just to make it out of our galaxy, because there wouldn't be enough fuel for them to carry that journey out by themselves. And if they'd missed that, they would have to wait another 150 years before they could do that experiment again. And then it's like, whoa, you just come back and you're like, there are so many bigger things in the world.
Yeah.
Why am I looking at this girl?
But the thing is, what's amazing is now we can sort of process that because of the technological age. If we go back 10 years ago, that would have been amazing. Go back 10 years further. So the fact that these minds are coming up with these things, observing them, and other people are creating selfies, and you're like, are you?
Yeah.
Look at what's being missed here, you know?
Yeah, and I find that I fall into this hole, and I think we all do. I don't know if you do, but I feel like I do sometimes. I fall into the Instagram hole, because that's society. That's that outer ring that's now having an impact on my direct life. But the minute I start reading again, and I read quite a lot, I then forget about those things, and it's more like, wow, there are so many things in the world to know. There are, why would you discount all of that? Bring your reality a little bit broader, and again, back to reality. Your reality should, I think, be a little bit broader, and so that you can explore more things, because there are so many things that are waiting to be known. But you're laser focusing on social media. So when I get like that, and when I get like, oh, I need to lose a little bit of weight, or my this, and we all do it, I think, and I always do this, I think about that Voyager 2 that's currently just left our Milky Way a couple years ago, 2004, and left. That was traveling for like 42 years. That's how long it took it.
At like 61,000 miles an hour. So 61,000 kilometers an hour or something. Like,
yeah, something ridiculous. It was like 10. I can't even remember. And then I think, you know what? There are bigger things.
I mean, I had a Facebook rant after 3 days we'd been in lockdown. I had a Facebook rant. I know you're not on my Facebook. I'm known for my Facebook.
I'm not on Facebook.
It's good.
Yeah.
I had so many debates and stuff on Facebook.
I love that. Maybe I should get Facebook just for that.
Yeah, but I had one because parents were on there saying, I've done no homework with my kid. It's ridiculous. How am I meant to do this? I don't even know how to do this sort of maths. And I went on there and I said, like, if you're trying to teach your kid, if you're trying to educate your kid and you're trying to follow the school curriculum, you're a fucking idiot. Like, say to your kid, right, my life now, I'm in a brilliant chance that I get to educate you. So what are we interested in? I like space. I like space too. I don't know anything about it. Get on YouTube or Google, pick a subject, and educate both of you at the same time.
So easy nowadays. It's so easy to just go and teach yourself about things, and there are so many online courses now as well. I mean, one of my friends, and I'll send you the link, was saying how we wanted to learn about neuroscience, because I think he said he thought of something that, he had a dream where he thought about something that he doesn't remember seeing until he woke up, and he thought, I haven't thought about that moment in my life ever. So clearly that information was in there somewhere, and my brain retrieved it in my sleep. And then he was like, that just blew my mind. So I told him about this course. It's the University of Chicago is doing a neuroscience course free during the pandemic, for people to learn about neuroscience. Which
great! That's all I need is a free. That's me finished then.
But it's amazing how the more access we have to things, the less we want to. I guess if it's too easy, it's too easy. You're not going to want to do it because it's there. It's there.
Yeah, and it's too easy because there's so many options. I might do this, I might do that. I mean, I'm a terrible procrastinator. But and also, look, I mean, I'm not saying people should be like me in the slightest. I can only use me as an example because I'm me, But
relativity.
Relativity. So during this lockdown, my TV doesn't go on before 5. The only reason it goes on at 5 is because I watch the update, the parliamentary update I watch. And sorry.
That's all right. You need to get that.
No, I'm just checking it just to see if they urgently need me.
Okay.
No, I'm good at the minute. Yeah, so I check the parliamentary update just so that I can go on Facebook and moan about them. So I do that. So my TV doesn't go on till 5, but I write a lot. So I read a lot. I read at least a book a month, usually non-fiction. I don't really read much fiction. So I read about a book a month, and so I'm reading all day. I've been doing a lot of writing, so I've been doing that, and I've been doing a lot of podcasts. My TV doesn't go on before 5, and then I watch TV. But the amount of people who are just churning through stuff, and I'm like, you're missing the most unique opportunity of our lifetime to do something. Like, do anything. I know there will be people will listen to this, and because, oh, neuroscience, that sounds quite interesting, and they'll turn it off after, and they'll never look at anything to do with neuroscience again, or they haven't looked at it before, and I'm like, man, now's your time. Like, come on,
well,
grab it.
there was someone who posted on my Instagram recently saying, if you don't get all the goals that you wanted to get done, I can't remember exactly how it was worded. It's not that you didn't have time; it's that you didn't have, I don't know, what's the word? Like, you didn't have the care.
For the drive.
You didn't care enough. Yeah, you didn't have the drive. There we go. You didn't have the drive to do it, which is true. But equally, I think a lot of people are getting stressed out about the fact that they feel like they have to do things. So equally, I do appreciate people that are maybe just taking this time to really just chill out. Because they might have stressful lives. They might have
chilling out. Learn some meditation. Learn some stuff that actually is helping you. Because if you're not in society, or how we were 5-6 weeks ago, if you're not finding your time to chill out, find out ways now that you can carry that back when we go back to how we were. Learn how to meditate.
100%.
You know, do stuff like yoga and stuff. Address that stuff. So even by doing nothing, do something. That's the way that I think about it. I'm quite proactive, I guess. Right. So before we get going, I just want to know how are you looking now when you're all finished up, qualified? What's your in your mind's eye, your drive? Where are you looking to take things? What are you looking to do?
I'm not 100% sure because I've been toying with the idea of doing graduate medicine, so I could potentially go down that route. But if I was to stay in neuropsychology, I think just being able to discover more in terms of developmental psychology and the impacts, and also I think I'd really like to teach people about positive thinking. And I know that sounds like, oh, you're just one of those people that's trying to be positive. But like, I think it's been shown that through long-term potentiation, negative thinking will and can, set itself in the brain. And like we said about, social, the ring that's coming in there, it shouldn't be there, it should be there. So I would like people to learn, and I would like to educate on the impacts of that. And I think everything we've just spoken about ties in exactly what I think and what I believe in. So how we can become so narrow-minded towards certain things like social media, and forget that there are bigger things in the world, forget that the brain can learn and will learn and wants to learn. So I guess as a neuropsychologist, it would definitely be looking at neurological side and psychological side of problems, and being a bit more holistic, I think, in that sense. And rather than labeling people, so alcoholic or whatever, there's always a reason. And I think that's
the why. The why is the fundamental thing.
Why.
The why. Always ask the why until there's no, until you've got an answer. Because, why do you do that? Because he's alcoholic. Okay, that's my answer. No. We just started. We've just started here. Why?
Everyone, I think, everyone has a story. Everyone has something to say. And I think we need to learn to listen to each other a little bit more in society. And because, like I said earlier, with water, you can either drown or you can put out a fire. You can do either good or bad with it. And it's the same with society with interactions. We as humans can either really uplift each other or really destroy each other. You could potentially give someone PTSD by the way you behave with them, or you could nurture them and lift them. And I think Bristol is quite good in that sense. I do think we have a really nice sense of community. There's a lot of positive people that are just pushing each other to go a certain way. So I do feel really privileged to live somewhere like Bristol. There's a lot of positivity and a lot of just community.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like, we're privileged as well, like to have someone like yourself. That's why I wanted you to come on. Like the stuff that you put out. I mean, obviously it's a bit arrogant to say, oh, it's the stuff that I enjoy, so I want to speak to you, but that's what it is. And
Yeah.
hopefully people listen to this, and because people say, like, I'm not arrogant to assume that people want to listen to me, so I don't make these about me. And
Yeah.
I try and talk about subjects that aren't my field like this, because people want to hear from you, and you're so personable, and everything's so well put together, but at the same time you're still a little bit wild in the stuff that you post.
Yeah.
You like ballet, and you're not just someone who sat there with a tweed jacket.
I do the ballet and I do the yoga to kind of keep my crazy like in control. I've got to have something.
You've got to control the crazy. You've got to control the crazy.
100%.
Don't let the crazy out, I think so. Without being too like intrusive, and ask you a bit of is money a big factor in that? As in, so would a neuropsychologist earn potentially a lot less than someone who went down a medical field? Is there not as much?
No, actually, I think someone in neuropsychology would probably earn more because you have the potential. Well, I don't know actually, because I suppose you could say the same thing for medicine, but psychologists I do think eventually do get paid pretty well, over 100K from what I've heard. But I think you have the potential to, have private clients, which I suppose you could have in medicine as well. I obviously want to earn good money. I left home when I was 18, and I've always, I came to Europe with one suitcase, and I was like, cool, what am I going to do now? So I've always found a way, and I've always been quite good at finding, good jobs and making myself comfortable in the areas I'm in. So I do want to live a comfortable life. I'm not money driven in the sense that like I would go down that route because it's money.
I didn't want it to seem like, I'm not saying you're going to sell yourself out or anything, but I mean, obviously for me, if I'm in a situation where I can take two routes, both of them are going to be helping each other. Both of them are going to be helping others, sorry. So they're both going to help people. They're both in fields that I like. They're both within the parameters of what I want to work. This one earns 100 grand and this one earns 40. I mean, you have to say, I'm going to pursue. And this is more of a.
They both have the potential to earn quite good money.
Yeah.
The only reason I wouldn't do medicine is because I'm already 28, so I'll be 30 when 29 when I qualify. And then I will probably do 4 years of medicine. I'll be 33, and then you have to do your F1 and F2 junior doctor, so F1 F2, and then you start specializing. So I'll be 35. I'm probably going to have a kid somewhere then, and then I'm probably going to have another kid somewhere after that, and then I just feel like I'm going to be 40 and still a junior doctor. It just kind of makes me a little bit sad, but at the end of the day, you can't let.
We need you. Like, this is the thing. Like, we need you, and we need the way that you think. The industry needs you. The science needs you. So I think, listen. Don't base your career on anything I say, Mark. I'm someone who chose to get punched in the face.
Anyone who compliments my brain, I'm like, thank you. Obviously I care what I look like, but when someone is like, you're very smart, I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, when I used to be a doorman and people used to like chuck him out like, you're bald with funny ears because they're cauliflower ears. I'm like, you can that as long as you think I'm funny. That's all I care. Like, all that matters.
Well, the thing is, I've learned to understand is that you can't change what you look like, so you better come to terms with it because that is your face.
And everyone who does change never ends up looking better. So
and they're probably still not happy.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, so I think I don't know exactly where. I think if I went down the medicine route, it would still maybe be around psychiatry, and because the brain just blows my mind, and the way we think and the way we do things and the impact that the world has on us is really interesting.
I really hope you do, not because it's going to make you happy, but just because we can have these every year or every couple of years. We can have a catch up and talk about how things are going.
Yeah. So, well, we can still have them. I'm sure that I'll still learn along the way, but neuropsychology, or I always toyed with the idea of forensic psychology. Just I don't know. I think down that route, the brain just blows my mind. Psychology blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm reading a book at the moment, nothing to do with neuropsychology in any way, shape, or form. I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called Unnatural Causes. It's about forensic pathology.
Okay.
He's a forensic pathologist, and it's all about his career as like all the postmortems he's done, all the autopsies he's done, starting from like back in the 80s. He worked on cases where didn't even have DNA or fingerprinting capabilities, and it follows him all the way through. And some of the stuff he's talking about, the way he tracks and the way a knife goes through organs, I'm like, Jerusalem, this is amazing. It's science, like allow you to do that, you know. But hey, I can teach you how to throw a punch. So
Sorry?
I can teach you how to throw a punch. So,
no, I've actually written down a bunch of things that you've said because they really did, want to continue reading about them. So if you have any book recommendations, I think it'd be great if you could send them over.
Yeah, definitely. So is there anyone you want to shout out, anything you want to mention, anything you haven't covered you want to talk about before we go, or?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it all. I think, for me, this has been really great. I'm really honored. When you asked me, I was like, ooh.
Oh no, the honor is mine. Like, honestly,
bless you.
Nico, I swear to God, I could sit here for another 2 hours easily.
I could as well.
I just know the longer it goes, the people turn off. You know.
Yeah, no, 100%.
I think about an hour and a half is about perfect for people's attention span because they have things to do. But honestly, I feel like I could ring you again tomorrow and we could just boom.
Yeah. Well, we could. You know what? We could do another one. You know, in a few weeks, maybe we'll read more papers and more books, and then come back and.
If you wanted to have a look at any of the impacts of CTE from brain trauma and the way that's meant, because obviously I've been punched in the head a lot, and that's manifesting itself a lot now, CTE. So if you wanted to have a look at that and we could have a little talk, then feel free. Otherwise, CTE, chronic. I forgot what it stands for now. Chronic.
Oh, sorry. Is it a book though?
No.
Oh, okay,
It's like a brain disorder. From Impact. Will Smith did a film about it called.
I think I read last year because I was talking to someone about homelessness in the UK before we log off real quick. That apparently over 50% of homeless people have had brain trauma, brain lesions, accidents. I think that'd be an interesting topic. Yeah,
lots of American footballers have like killed their wives and stuff, and they've flooded their brain afterwards, and they have CTE from concussion.
Yeah, so, I'm not surprised. Yeah,
if you look at that and if you find it interesting, by all means message me and say, whereas that subject was boring, or just say like, oh, I love it. I will. No, we should definitely do another one of these. I think it'll be great. We'll go and stock up on more information. Perfect. So listen, I'm gonna put this out. I'll put your name and stuff on it. If you don't want people to follow you on Instagram and stuff because you keep it personal, that's completely fine.
If anything, I should probably make my Instagram a little bit less personal and more scientific. So this will be great.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you again. Honestly, you don't need to thank me. It's a pleasure.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Stay there. I'll cut these lot off and then I'll speak to you separately. Thank you.